My father passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He was a strict but loving man who worked tirelessly to ensure I had a good life. Loyalty and honesty were his most cherished values, and he embodied them in every aspect of his life. While my parents' marriage had its share of problems, my father tried his best to make it work. He believed in the sanctity of marriage, but as I found out, that belief came at a significant cost for him. Immediately after my father's funeral, when my grief was still raw, my mom sat me down for a conversation that changed everything. She told me I had a half-sister named Emily. She explained that Emily was the result of an affair she had during her marriage to my father. My father had discovered the affair when my mother became pregnant, and he was devastated. Furious and feeling utterly betrayed, he gave her an ultimatum. Either she would end the pregnancy or give the baby up for adoption, or he would divorce her. Desperate to salvage their marriage and preserve our family, my mother chose to give the baby up. She arranged for her sister, who lived in Europe at the time and couldn't have children of her own, to adopt the child. My father agreed with such an arrangement, though it was clear he never forgave her for her betrayal. My mother claimed this arrangement was a compromise that allowed her to keep our family. She insisted she had done the right thing for everyone involved. Growing up, I was blissfully unaware of this dark chapter in my parents' lives. Throughout my childhood, my mother claimed that she and her sister were not close. She said their relationship was strained, which is why we never visited or spoke about her sister's life. I never thought much of it. Only once I found a photo of a baby girl I stumbled across as a child. When I asked about it, my mother brushed it off, saying it was a picture of her sister's daughter, my cousin. She dismissed my curiosity, but I didn't think much of it at the time. After her bombshell revelation, my mother continued, telling me that after my father's death, she reached out to her sister and her daughter. She said it was her chance to make things right after being robbed of the opportunity to be a mother to Emily. Her voice cracked as she spoke of the suffering she's endured all these years. She said she wants her daughter back in her life, and she wants to repay her for all the years of not having a real mother in her life, and that I need to help her do that. Then, she drops a shocking request. She asked me to share my father's inheritance with my half-sister. She said my father would have wanted it because he always felt guilty of robbing my mother of her second child. Well, my father's will was unambiguous. Everything was to go to me. He had worked tirelessly to provide for me and ensure my future. The inheritance was more than just money. It was a testament to his sacrifices and his love for me. I told my mother, firmly and without hesitation, that I would not share the inheritance. Emily had no legal or moral claim to it, and I wasn't going to dishonor my father's wishes, and I was sure he would roll in his grave if I would give his hard-earned money to my mother's affair child. My mother's reaction was explosive. She accused me of being selfish and heartless, claiming that my father would have wanted to make things right for Emily if he was still alive. She said Emily was my blood, she was my sister, who was robbed of having a mother, and she deserves the inheritance for what my father did to her. Her words stung, but I knew they were untrue. For a few weeks after our argument, I believed the matter was settled. But then I received a letter from my father's estate lawyer. To my utter shock, Emily had filed a claim against the inheritance, presenting a birth certificate that listed my father as her biological parent. I was stunned. I was sure that my father would never have signed such a document, especially knowing Emily was the result of my mother's affair, and after demanding my mother gets rid of her or gives her up for adoption. When I confronted my mother, she claimed that my father had signed the birth certificate himself. She said she had done it because he felt guilty about forcing her to give up her daughter all those years ago. At first, I was taken aback. The idea that my father, a man so principled and deeply hurt by her betrayal, would suddenly reverse his stance didn't sit right with me. Something about her explanation felt off, and her nervous demeanor only deepened my suspicion. I decided to investigate further, and what I discovered left me seething with anger. My lawyer had uncovered that my mother had forged the birth certificate. She had falsified my father's signature and had the document notarized by a shady acquaintance. She orchestrated the entire scheme, using the forged document to bolster Emily's claim to the inheritance. I was furious. My mother had not only tried to steal my inheritance, but had also dragged Emily into her web of lies. I couldn't let her actions go unpunished. I decided to sue my mother for forgery, fraud, and emotional distress. When she was served with the lawsuit, she showed up at my house, screaming and crying, accusing me of ruining her life. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming she had only done what she did to make things fair for Emily. She said I was tearing the family apart and refused to acknowledge her wrongdoing. She repeatedly insisted that she had been robbed of being a mother to Emily and that it was my duty to make things right. Emily, on the other hand, was mortified. She reached out to apologize and revealed that my mother had pressured her into filing the claim. Emily had been reluctant from the start, but felt she had no choice. She even offered to testify on my behalf, which she eventually did. Her testimony was the final nail in the coffin for my mother's case. The court ruled in my favor. My mother was ordered to pay a significant fine, and while she avoided jail time, her reputation was shattered. Family members who had initially supported her turned their backs after learning the full extent of her actions. She now lives in a small apartment and constantly complains about how I ruined her life. She tells anyone who will listen that I'm a greedy, ungrateful child who turned on my own mother. My grandparents have urged me to forgive her, saying, "She's still your mom," but I can't bring myself to feel sympathy for her. She not only betrayed my father, but she also betrayed me, lied to me, and tried to rob me of the legacy my father worked so hard to leave behind. Her actions have left a permanent scar on our relationship. Emily and I have stayed in touch, and while our relationship is still fragile, she's expressed deep regret for going along with my mother's scheme and has been supportive since the truth came out. I don't blame her. She was as much a victim of my mother's manipulation as I was. I've spent months grappling with this situation. Part of me wonders if I was too harsh in suing my own mother. OP's mother's actions were manipulative and deceitful. Forging legal documents is a serious crime, and she tried to use it to steal what OP's father left for OP. It's not just about the money. It's about respecting OP's father's wishes and legacy. OP had every right to stand up for herself and protect what legally belongs to her. OP's mother created this situation, not OP. OP needs to be strong and not let anyone guilt her into feeling otherwise. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Not the a-hole. Your mother clearly hasn't taken accountability for her actions. She betrayed not only your father, but also you and Emily by dragging her into this mess. What she did goes beyond mere family drama. It was fraud, plain and simple. Suing her wasn't just necessary. It was the only way to protect yourself and ensure justice was served. You've been more than patient, and honestly, you handled this with grace. Not the a-hole. Forgiveness doesn't mean ignoring serious wrongdoings or allowing people to walk all over you. Your mother's behavior was selfish and destructive, and she involved an innocent party, Emily, in her scheme. You have every right to honor your father's legacy and protect what he left for you. She made her choices, and now she has to face the consequences. You're not the bad guy here, and don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Not the a-hole. The fact that your mother went so far as to forge documents and manipulate Emily into filing a claim says a lot about her character. It's heartbreaking that she put you and Emily in this position, but none of this is your fault. You handled this with far more patience and decency than most people would. At the end of the day, you honored your father's wishes, and that's what matters. Keep your head high, and don't feel guilty for doing the right thing. A few years ago, my partner and I accidentally ended up pregnant. Ladies, if you are taking antibiotics, they might affect your birth control. I knew I couldn't take care of her, so my partner and I agreed to adopt her out to family members. But from the start, I was very ill, and I knew I could lose her, so didn't want my actual first choice to adopt her to know anything. We only told the people we had to, so my brother-in-law and sister-in-law wouldn't learn about her. I didn't want them getting their hopes up just to lose her. But my sister had dealt with a difficult pregnancy, so I contacted her to ask for advice, and said that a childless cousin and wife were getting the baby. Well, my sister was offended that a cousin would get the child instead of her, even though she had 2 kids already, one of whom had dealt with health issues in the past. She shipped over giving advice and berated me, giving me an anxiety attack. She threatened to cut off contact with her kids, threatened to tell everyone, anything she could think of to blackmail me into giving her the baby. Later, my daughter was stillborn, like so close that if she'd been induced the day before, she'd have been fine. When I told my sister, I was accused of lying and hiding the baby, told I would never see my nibblings again, and never to contact her again. Our mother has been saying that I hurt her feelings and made her feel like I didn't think she'd be a good mother to my baby. That's why she had such a strong reaction. She also said that my sister believes me and is sorry she hurt me. I said she has my number and can call to say sorry whenever she wants. But she said not to call her. But apparently she's taken that back and wants me to call. I'm the oldest, so have always been made to say sorry first growing up, so everyone probably expects it. So, am I the a-hole for not having her my first choice to adopt, and for not calling to apologize first? Edit 1. I knew about the antibiotics. There was also a broken condom, but I only knew because it happened to someone else. My pharmacist didn't mention, my doctor didn't, and much of the country has abstinence-only S-Ed, so I certainly didn't learn there. I was sharing so others would know. Edit 2. The couple that wanted to get my daughter were my brother-in-law and his wife, but I didn't want them to get wind of any of this. So I said a cousin because I have tons of those. She couldn't have found a cousin where I only have one married brother-in-law. My sister was never going to get my daughter. I wasn't tricking her into thinking she wouldn't get the baby when she would. She had 2 kids. My partner's brother and brother's wife had been trying for years without success. They have since adopted another child and love him as much as they would one from their bodies. Final edit. Based on some suggestions, I had a talk with my mother. She has agreed to not pressure me to contact my sister and only give me reports on how the nibblings are doing. Since that, she has been doing very well and respecting how much it hurts me to think about everything that happened. Also, based on another suggestion, I had Mom ask my sister if I could resume contact with my nibblings. My sister and her husband took some time to think about it and said yes. I'm going to get a greeting card basically saying hi and I love them, and it will have a couple self-addressed envelopes and stamps as well as a few dollars, and my email, so they can choose how to get back to me. They might decide the idea of exchanging cards is fun, hence the money. I know it's an old-fashioned idea, but you never know. I thought a card might be better than a letter because then they can choose how to do this, rather than a big info dump, which their parents might not even allow them to read. And in a few years, they'll be able to make their own choices on what to do and already have an open line to me. Not the a-hole. I wouldn't be surprised if the stress of what your sister did to you caused this. She doesn't care about anyone but herself. If I were you, I would never want to see her ever again. Stop letting them manipulate you. The things that your sister said and did cannot be taken back. Not the a-hole. It was your baby that you grew and had every right to choose who that baby went to. No offense to you or your family, but your sister sounds spoiled and entitled. I can't imagine trying to pick on and manipulate someone in their time of need. Not the a-hole. Nobody should be entitled to have someone else's baby. You have nothing to be sorry for. It wasn't about her. It was about gifting childless parents with the baby. Your sister is so self-centered. If she really feels sorry, she can call. Using your mother to make you call her for her to apologize is insane. I am sure she wants you to apologize before she does it. Don't. She has to grow up and learn how to treat people. And I'm sick of stupid protocol based on age. She messed up. She has to apologize, not you. You being the eldest is not relevant. 17 years ago, I, 39 female, started going to a new local bar with friends. I quickly became friends with the owner, 51 male. We just clicked. It was great. Over a year later, in early 05, we started dating. I openly admit I loved him deeply. It ended the last week of 07 because I found out he cheated. I was devastated. I went full no contact for almost a year. Once I got over it, I realized I missed the friendship we had, so I reached out. He felt the same. We became closer than we ever were. It has been 100% platonic since then. The only thing that might be considered inappropriate is he calls me B. It's shortened from beautiful. He's called me that since I've known him. That's it. In 2011, when I was diagnosed with cancer, he went to chemo with me. In 2013, when his mother and sister tragically died in a car accident, I held his hand as he gave the eulogy. This is how close we are. Through all of this, it was never anything more than friendship. In 2015, I met my husband, 39 male. Around the same time, best friend opened a second location of his bar, so we didn't see each other much. Husband met best friend at his bar, saw him multiple other times too. Never had an issue. I was 100% transparent about the fact that we dated. Still no issue. I had kids and was tied up. We rarely saw each other, but talked almost daily. Husband and I have 2 kids, 3 female, 1 male, and I adopted his daughter from his first marriage, 7 female. Husband is an improved productivity consultant and is out of town frequently. I'm a stay-at-home mom. Recently, best friend hired someone to handle day-to-day of his bars, so he could concentrate on the in vitro him and his girlfriend, 52 female, of 3 years were trying. It was successful. He's beyond excited. He's been reaching out more to me because I have kids. Advice, opinions, etc. multiple times a day. Last week, best friend invited me to an impromptu lunch. Hadn't seen him in almost a year. I happily got the kids ready and went. Husband flipped the duck out. It was disrespectful and inappropriate to go without him. He was okay with friendship from afar, but since we talk more now, it makes him uncomfortable that I'm prioritizing a man I used to sleep with, and I should back off and cut him out. I'm shocked. In 5 years, he has never hinted that it bothered him. They get along great, laugh and joke. I refused. Duck that. You don't get to pick my friends. It's been 17 years. Before this lunch issue, husband has never shown controlling or even odd behaviors. We've had such a great relationship. This came out of left field. Am I the a-hole? Edited to add. The B thing. My husband has known all along what it is from. He asked, why does he call you B? And I was honest. Best friends started reaching out more, not me. I respond when I can. 3 kids keep me busy. We don't call really, haven't for years. It's texting. I'm very much in love with my husband. I love our life. Finally, all the notifications prompted my husband to ask what the duck was up with my phone. I showed him this. He's less than thrilled I put our business online, but it prompted us to agree to discuss it tonight after the kids go to bed. Neither of us want our marriage to end. Not the a-hole. You've been transparent about your past since the beginning, and he hasn't had a problem with the friendship until now. You may want to ask him what else is bothering him, because it doesn't make any sense that it's your best friend. You're both in committed relationships and have children. If your hubby is feeling insecure all of a sudden, try to get to the root of that, but don't let go of your friendship. I had a similar issue with my boyfriend of 3 years and my best friend of 18 years. I got diagnosed with cancer and best friend immediately traveled from out of state to visit. Boyfriend suddenly had an issue with him being around. Turns out, the visit just made boyfriend feel like he wasn't doing enough for me. Egos are fragile. Not the a-hole. Here's why. It makes him uncomfortable that I'm prioritizing a man I used to sleep with. This isn't true. I know it's not because in order to prioritize a person, it has to be at the expense of something else. That could be your husband or kids, your job, your home, but it isn't any of that. There's no complaint that you're neglecting him or the children. Your job is as a homemaker and mother, neither of which are roles that are having their quality questioned. So what exactly are you prioritizing your friend over? If there was an answer, it would be your husband's jealousy, and in my opinion, that would be a smart use of prioritization. Don't entertain ignorant actions by questioning your own judgment. Everyone sucks here. Am I the only one feeling like OP is really underselling the romantic aspect and bulking up the platonic aspect? Yes, he may have been there for you and you were there for him for big events, but those big events happened way before you even met your husband. It's obvious to me that this relationship waned as you became more committed to your current husband. Not sure if that was something you did, he did, or your husband did, but that seems to be the truth of it. Now, it's seeming like you're home alone more. Since your husband is away, you're bored, and have started emotionally investing more and more into this man through frequent phone calls and texting. You admitted yourself you have not even seen this man in over a year, which speaks enough for the actual quality of the relationship. So why were you so ready to see him in person one-on-one? At least I think so. Wasn't sure if you meant you brought your kids with you, when you would usually spend time together in group settings or with your husband, as soon as your husband leaves for a few days. I think you're lying to yourself, and your husband is picking up on these details while you try to pretend they're irrelevant. Either way, you have suddenly decided to treat this man with the same attention as you had when you were single and childless, which would definitely be a red flag if I was your husband. But also, everyone sucks, because you shouldn't have to give up the relationship if it's truly as platonic as you say it is. Your husband should trust you, but you could stand to act a bit more trustworthy. Some info. My friend, T, had the biggest crush on my wife back when we were teens. She isn't interested since she had a crush on me. T convinced me to ask her out with the intention of dumping her. The whole point was she'd be heartbroken, then he'd be there for her. Very dumb, heartless, and not my proudest moment, believe me. We were both two stupid 19-year-olds. A couple of months later, I felt guilty and told her the whole truth. She stopped being friends with us both. Months later, I missed her and reached out because, surprise, got feelings for her. Took her time to forgive me, but we tried a relationship for real. Been together ever since. T, of course, heard about this, and we haven't been friends in a long time. It's been 12 years. Still have a few same friends from back then, but haven't seen T around. One of our close friends got married last weekend. Went with my wife and our son, who's 6. We knew T'd be there too, but didn't think anything of it, especially with it being so long already. During the reception is when it got weird. Wouldn't stop staring at our table. We said hi before that, but didn't make conversation. He came over again sometime later after he'd been practically staring for an hour and already drunk. Made some comments about how crazy life worked out after stealing my girl, like if this was some high school drama. Being creepy the way he looked at my wife. When my son came back to the table, T tried to introduce himself to him as one of our old friends from school, then made a joke that he almost could have been his dad. We stopped him there. My wife took my son to the dance floor, and I told T to leave us alone for the rest of the night. He claimed he wasn't doing anything wrong, so my wife and I decided to go. We informed the groom, my friend, we were leaving, and he asked us why, so I told him. Instead, he had his brothers ask T to talk outside, to avoid a scene, then told him to leave. Security didn't let him back into the hall. My friend apologized to us. He didn't think T would behave like that, even if he was drunk. Some of our friends heard what happened at the party and think I was an a-hole for completely overreacting having T kicked out, simply because he also had a right to be there celebrating our friend's wedding, and to cut him some slack because he was drunk. Obviously, seeing us together brought back old feelings, so we can't blame him. I get we have history, though it wouldn't be a big deal after all these years, and he made us uncomfortable with his comments, especially around my son. Wasn't expecting something like this to happen, so I'm not sure if maybe I did overreact, instead of ignoring T and let him be part of the celebration too. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. You didn't have him kicked out, the groom did. You were going to leave. Not the a-hole. Cut him some slack because he was drunk. Pfft, the hell with that. I don't know why people think this is ever a decent excuse. Of course, he did have a right to be there, but he didn't have the right to be there at the expense of other people's comfort, drunk or not. Not the a-hole. From what I read, you didn't ask him to be removed. You and your wife chose to remove yourselves from the situation to avoid causing a scene. Politely informed the groom you were leaving, and he's the one who asked why and acted on the information given to him. You didn't ask for T to be removed. You simply answered a question as to why you were leaving. Sorry, but the inappropriate behavior is on T, regardless of whether he was drunk or not. OP, you're in the clear, mate. My sister has been cheating on her husband for about 3 months, or at least that's what she told me when I found out. They've been married about 18 months. So I found out when the idiot accidentally sent me a paragraph of pretty strongly incriminating flirting and instructions to meet up while in the bathroom at my house, with her husband in the living room watching movies with me and my husband. It was very evidentially not intended for her husband, and even talked about when he would be at work, so on. I confronted her later that night, and she flipped out. She first started saying he was aggressive to her, and that she was doing it out of revenge. I found that hard to believe. But when I pushed on it, she tried to play it off that when she said aggression, she just meant he wasn't fulfilling her needs. I told her to grow the F up and talk to her husband instead of betraying him. She said she would. I promised I wouldn't say anything. 2 months down the line, and she still hasn't. We play a weekly game of Dungeons & Dragons, which I run for my husband, her husband, and a mutual friend of ours. Conveniently, her and her husband's characters are married in the game. Eventually, I boiled over and created a situation in the story which heavily implies her character was cheating on his, and I used real-world locations and people, thinly disguised, to push the point. Finally, it clicked in his head, and he thought it was a joke at first, but I kept a straight face and stared at him. He caught on, and she started crying and stormed out. He went after her. This was 2 days ago, and I've not heard from either. I feel like I betrayed her trust while telling her not to do that to him. But at the same time, I feel like she doesn't deserve my respect given the situation. Everyone sucks here. You told him this through a tabletop game? Why couldn't you have pulled the guy aside and talked to him like an adult? Seriously. Wife is obviously not in the right for cheating, and I support you exposing this, but not the way I would have chosen. I think you made it worse than it had to be. Everyone sucks here. You're not an a-hole for telling him, which was the right thing to do, But doing it in such a public and convoluted, seemingly sarcastic way was not the right way to handle it. She obviously sucks for cheating on him. He doesn't suck, I guess, but there is no abbreviation for everyone sucks except for the third party. Everyone sucks here, leaning towards yes, the a-hole. I would ultimately say that it's not your business, and what you did was wrong, not to mention basically airing it in front of that friend and your husband. If you were really going to tell him, you shouldn't have made a show out of it. That's the most disgusting part about this. What did you expect her to do when she caught on? Announce it in front of everyone? And you do realize that you also forced him to make a jerk out of himself, right? There's a good chance that he pulled the, "oh, this is a joke" card to save face, since he probably didn't want to get into a serious private discussion in front of everyone, and you forced him to do that. Your sister is still obviously an a-hole. Cheating is awful, and she knew that she would have to tell him for 3 months now. I don't know if she continued to cheat during that time, or was merely gearing up to tell him, but either way, 3 months is enough time to figure that out. I would say of the three of you, her husband is the only one that's not an a-hole here. I, 34 female, lost my husband Jake, 38 male, 6 months ago in a car accident. Jake and I were married for 8 years, and we were happy. This was my second marriage. I'd been divorced in my mid-20s and had 2 kids, now 12 and 10, from my first marriage. When Jake and I got together, I was upfront about my reluctance to have more children. I was overwhelmed with 2 kids already, and Jake assured me that he was fine with it. He said he loved me and that my kids were enough for him. Jake's mother, Mary, 63 female, never liked me. From the day Jake introduced me to her, she made her disdain for me abundantly clear. Mary came from a traditional family and had high expectations for her only son. She thought Jake deserved someone younger, prettier, and more willing to give him a fresh start. According to Mary, I was nothing but a divorced woman with baggage. Mary's hostility was overt. She made snide remarks about my parenting, claiming that I wasn't doing enough for my kids, or that Jake was taking on responsibilities that weren't his. She often brought up Jake's exes, saying things like, "Oh, remember when you dated Sarah? She was such a sweet girl. She would have made a wonderful wife and mother. You know she's married with 3 kids now." Jake defended me when she crossed the line, but he also tended to downplay her comments. "You know how she is," he'd say. "She'll come around eventually." Except she never did. Over the years, I'd learned to keep my distance, attending family events sparingly, and keeping interactions with Mary to a minimum. When Jake died, my world fell apart. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my husband. I was also trying to keep my kids' lives as stable as possible. Jake had been a great stepfather to them. He took pride in helping them with their school projects, cheering them on at soccer games, and being the stable male role model they needed after my first marriage fell apart. Jake had also been a meticulous planner. He left behind a detailed will, ensuring that I and my kids would be taken care of financially. There was life insurance, savings, and investments that would secure our future. For a brief moment, I thought Jake's careful planning would at least give me the peace of mind to grieve without financial worries. But that peace didn't last long. About a month after Jake's death, I started going through his belongings. Among his things, I found an old phone tucked away in a drawer. I decided to charge it, thinking it might contain photos or memories I'd want to keep. Instead, I found something that shattered my world all over again. The phone contained emails, text messages, and photos documenting a long-term affair Jake had with a woman named Laura, 35 female. They'd been together for at least 5 years. Laura had 2 children of her own, aged 8 and 6. The messages between them painted a vivid picture of their relationship. Jake frequently referred to Laura's kids as his kids. There were photos of him taking them on trips, celebrating their birthdays, and even attending parent-teacher conferences. As if that wasn't enough, the messages revealed that Laura had been pregnant with Jake's child twice, but miscarried both times. The way Jake spoke about Laura in these messages broke my heart. He called her the love of his life and lamented how their situation kept them apart. I felt like my entire marriage had been a lie. I was devastated and furious. In my anger, I told everything to Mary, hoping for some kind of support or understanding or information. Instead, I was met with cold indifference. Mary admitted that she'd known about Laura and the affair all along. She said she'd kept quiet because she didn't want to upset Jake's life. But she didn't stop there. Mary called Laura the love of Jake's life and said Jake only stayed with me because I was convenient and stable, and Jake felt sorry for me. She claimed Jake had confided in her that he was unhappy in our marriage because I refused to have more children. Mary went on to say that Laura was everything I wasn't: warm, maternal, and willing to give Jake the family he supposedly wanted. Hearing this from Mary felt like a dagger to my heart. Mary's audacity didn't stop there. She demanded that I financially support Laura and her children. She argued that Jake's love for them made them like family, and that since Jake left me well off, I should do the right thing by helping them. She said it was my moral obligation to honor Jake's love for Laura and her kids, and because I was holding him from being happy. I was stunned. I flat out refused, telling her that I owed nothing to Laura or her kids, especially when she had an affair with my husband, knowing he's a married man. Mary called me selfish and accused me of dishonoring Jake's memory by turning my back on the people he loved. A few weeks later, Laura herself reached out to me. She was grieving too, and while her tone was less confrontational than Mary's, she hinted at suing me for a portion of Jake's estate. Laura claimed that she and her children had been family to Jake and deserved to be taken care of. She alleged that Jake had promised to include them in his will, but never got around to it. I told her to do whatever she felt was necessary, but made it clear I wouldn't give her a cent voluntarily. The stress of dealing with Mary and Laura was starting to take a toll on me. I was losing sleep, barely eating, and constantly anxious. Then, about 2 months ago, I began feeling physically unwell. I was constantly tired, nauseous, and dizzy. At first, I chalked it up to grief and stress, but the symptoms persisted. Finally, I went to the doctor, thinking I might need something to help me cope with the anxiety. What I didn't expect was to hear the words, "Congratulations, you're pregnant." I was stunned. Jake and I hadn't been actively trying, and I thought the chances of this happening were slim. But there it was. I was 3 months pregnant. The news was a whirlwind of emotions. Despite everything, I was thrilled. My kids were excited to have a sibling, and this baby felt like a blessing in what had been an otherwise devastating time. Not long after finding out about the pregnancy, I was served with court documents from Laura. She was following through on her threat to sue for a portion of Jake's estate. That was the final straw for me. I'd had enough of Mary's meddling and Laura's demands. I called Mary and told her about my pregnancy. I explained that this baby was Jake's child, and that my priority was protecting my kids and my unborn baby. Then I told her flat out, if she wanted any chance of being part of her grandchild's life, she needed to convince Laura to drop the case immediately. Otherwise, she could consider herself cut off for good. Mary's reaction was predictable. She accused me of using my pregnancy as leverage and said I was being toxic and manipulative. She even claimed I was lying about the pregnancy to avoid doing the right thing by Laura and her kids. I hung up on her, blocking her number and any further contact. I've since blocked Mary and Laura from contacting me directly. My lawyer is handling Laura's lawsuit, and I'm confident she doesn't have a legal claim. Jake's will was clear. Everything goes to me and my children. Laura and her kids aren't mentioned anywhere. Still, the stress of this situation is taking a toll on me. I'm trying to focus on my pregnancy and my kids, but still Mary's words haunt me sometimes. She insists I'm denying Laura's kids what Jake would have wanted for them. But why should I sacrifice my peace and my children's future for people who were part of Jake's betrayal? Laura's kids have a mother, and while I sympathize with their loss, they're not my responsibility. My loyalty is to my children, and that includes protecting them from toxic influences like Mary. So, Reddit. Am I the a-hole for refusing to support my late husband's mistress and her kids? Holy moly! Mary and Laura are absolutely out of line. It's bad enough that Jake betrayed OP for years, but for his mother to have the audacity to call OP selfish for not supporting his affair partner and her kids? That's next level absurd. OP owes Laura and her children absolutely nothing. The fact that Mary knew about the affair and still blames OP shows how deeply toxic she is. OP is doing the right thing by cutting them out of her life. OP needs to focus on her children and her pregnancy. OP and her family deserve peace and healing after everything they've been through. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Wow. Just wow. Not the a-hole. Jake's actions are terrible, But what's even worse is how his mother is actively trying to guilt trip you into financially supporting his mistress. That's some Olympic-level mental gymnastics. It's heartbreaking to find out about the affair, but you don't owe anyone, least of all Laura, a single cent. Let your lawyer handle this lawsuit nonsense and focus on your health and your kids. You're already dealing with so much, and you don't need their toxicity weighing you down. Stay strong. Honestly, Mary sounds like she's living in an alternate reality. You're the selfish one? Excuse me, but wasn't her precious son the one living a double life? And Laura wants to sue you? The entitlement here is mind-boggling. Jake's will is crystal clear. Everything goes to you and your children. Laura and her kids are not your responsibility, no matter what promises Jake might have made to her. Keep standing your ground, and don't let these people manipulate you. You're not the a-hole, and you've already shown more grace and strength than most people could muster in your situation. First of all, I'm so sorry for everything you've been through. Finding out about Jake's betrayal after his death must have been devastating. That said, you are absolutely not the a-hole. Laura knew she was the other woman, and she chose to stay in that situation. That's not on you. And Mary, her behavior is reprehensible. To call you toxic and accuse you of lying about your pregnancy is beyond cruel. She's trying to manipulate you, just like she did during your marriage. Block them all, protect your peace, and let your lawyer handle the drama. You're doing the right thing by focusing on your family. Update. The past few months have been some of the hardest of my life. Laura followed through with her lawsuit, claiming a portion of Jake's estate for herself and her children. What made things even more unbearable was that Mary, my mother-in-law, testified in court on Laura's behalf. She spoke at length about the deep love Jake supposedly had for Laura and her kids, essentially trying to legitimize their affair. It was humiliating, infuriating, and heartbreaking, especially since I was pregnant and constantly worried about the stress affecting my baby. Thankfully, the court ruled in my favor. Jake's will was clear, and Laura's lawsuit was dismissed. After months of turmoil, I delivered a beautiful, healthy baby girl. She's the light of our lives and has brought so much joy to my little family. But, of course, Mary didn't stop. Now she's demanding a paternity test to prove the baby is Jake's. She's even threatening to sue me for grandparents' rights, claiming she has a right to see her grandchild. I've already contacted my lawyer to prepare for whatever nonsense she throws at me next. At this point, I'm focused on protecting my children, my baby, and my peace. Mary and her antics have no place in our lives anymore. I refuse to let her toxicity poison what little happiness we've managed to rebuild. My sister and I met her fiancé's mother together, and that's when everything began. The mother-in-law-to-be made it clear that she preferred me over my sister. She said multiple times that if I was just a bit older, she would have wanted me to marry her son. My sister didn't like her, so when she and her fiancé was busy, I took care of the mother-in-law. Clarification: the mother-in-law was sickly and in need of supervision, and this role was given to me via sister and her fiancé. I wasn't trying to form an anti-sister clique. I really liked talking to older people, so we would have long conversations and we really enjoyed each other's company. My sister felt very unwelcomed by her mother-in-law, so I would visit her way more. Clarification: this was not to spite my sister, but it's because we had a set amount of checkup days to check up on her, and since my sister refused to meet her mother-in-law, I was told to go check up. Thus, I would visit her way more. Since the mother-in-law spent more time with me than my sister, she liked me more. It was a negative cycle. I always tried to make her see my sister in a more positive light, but I never succeeded, and nothing I could do would change her opinion on my sister and on me. She passed in June, bless her, and she gave her wedding ring, not to my sister, but to me. I had no input on her decision-making. I've never asked for it or shown interest in her ring. It was common knowledge that my sister wanted that ring for her wedding ring. I was shocked, just as much as everyone else was. But my sister's fiancé told me to consider it since it was his mother's dying wish. Clarification: her fiancé told me this news, as he was the only one who heard her last wishes. I thought about it, and I decided to keep the ring. When my sister found out, she called me crying and screaming about how much the ring meant to her, and that it was obviously supposed to be her wedding ring. My mother told me that it was the fiancé's mother's ring, which should go to the bride by tradition. My sister told me that ring meant so much to her, and she planned on having it, and that it was selfish of me to steal a ring I wasn't going to use. She told me her wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and that I was a jerk for choosing a dead, non-related woman's wish over a blood-related family's future. That got me, and I started to rethink my decision. Many people around me told me that I was ruining their wedding by preferring a dead stranger to my own flesh and blood. Some of my friends are telling me it was right for me to do, but some are saying that since the original owner is dead, I should stop being so sentimental and give the ring to the rightful owner. My sister is hurt that I chose to accept her dream wedding ring, and I'm so torn. I feel like a piece of crap for accepting it, but I also can't bear to break my promise to her dead mother-in-law. I have it right now, and I know every moment I have it, it hurts my sister immensely. Am I an a-hole for stealing my sister's wedding ring? Your sister didn't even like her future mother-in-law, but is putting her hand out for her wedding ring. Why does it mean so much to her when she didn't even like the woman? So, let me get this straight. Your sister didn't like her future mother-in-law. Her future mother-in-law didn't like her. You and your sister's mother-in-law liked each other and got on well, so when she died, mother-in-law left her wedding ring to you. Sister is now angry she didn't get her dream wedding ring. I'm guessing this wedding ring is not just a plain gold band you can pick up cheap anywhere. Not the a-hole. I'm sorry you lost someone you liked and got on with. Everyone sucks here. Everyone. As soon as your sister's future mother-in-law made it clear that she preferred you and wanted you to marry her son, you should have backed off, not stepped up the friendship. She's partly in the wrong for passing on a wedding ring to the preferred sister, not the one he actually chose to marry. That was a really obvious snub. Your sister is also in the wrong for being angry with you because the mother-in-law left the ring to you, and for caring so much about a piece of jewelry that belonged to someone who clearly didn't like her. And if she should be upset by anyone, it's her fiancé for encouraging you to keep the ring. You have every right to keep the ring, but if it hurts your sister immensely, I'd give it up or throw it into the fires of Mount Doom. Why would you want something so fraught with misery? The woman who left it to you is dead, and neither knows nor cares who's wearing her stuff. Hubs, 31 male, and I, 29 female, are due with baby number 1 and number 2. We are only 13 weeks along, but are looking into buying a new house. Our property is great, but our house is 1, not big enough, and 2, falling apart. This is a big deal to us as we thought it was never going to happen, as we had been trying for 5 years. Anyway, my parents have been looking into downsizing for the past few years, as they say their house is just too big after my sister and I grew up. This is completely understandable, as it's a 5-bedroom home. A few weekends ago, they sat Hubs and I down and asked if we would be interested in their house, as they closed on a new one and are preparing to move. This took us by surprise, and we told them we couldn't afford it. They insisted, saying they didn't want payment for it. We went through financials of the house and decided it would be doable, and we happily agreed, but insisted they let us pay them whatever we sold our property for. Okay, great. Both our problems were solved, and everyone is happy. Everyone except my sister, 26 female that is. Ever since we were kids, she swore up and down that the house would belong to her someday, and begged my parents to give it to her in their will. She's part of the reason they decided to downsize. When she found out, she called me to banshee scream at me about stealing her house from her and started demanding I give her my property because it's not fair that I get 2 while she rents. I told her the property was being sold and the money was going to our parents. She screamed more before I hung up. I texted her that she needs to stop being an entitled bee and that she couldn't afford either property, so she needs to start thinking with her head. Since then, I'm getting non-stop calls and messages calling me a thief and a bee for doing this to my sister, and that I have to give her my property. I'm starting to feel bad because she has always wanted our parents' house, and I'm getting it basically for 1/10 of the cost. Edit. Their house is worth about $90K. We are hoping to get $10K from our property, and are hoping to be able to give them $16K. They aren't planning on giving her an equal gift, as they give her $500 a month, and have bought her several cars throughout the years, and have bought all of her furniture brand new for her. I do not receive the extra money, though they bought me a car at 18, have helped with emergency repairs when we were younger, house and car, and like to buy big-ticket items on birthdays and Christmas. They bought us a new oven 2 Christmases ago. Our parents try hard to not play favorites. I don't accept most of the help unless it's 100% needed, because I don't want to do that to them, and I can support myself. Edit number 2. For those asking, we live in the Midwest in a small country town. Cost of living is pretty low, though we are giving up some amenities such as restaurants, grocery stores, access to jobs. We have a gas station and a dollar store. Not many people want to live here, which keeps prices low. This is a huge gift, and unless they are able to give her something to commensurate value at a similar stage in her life cycle, I can see why she's mad. She, of course, is not entitled to the house, and her reaction is crazy, but this is an example of big favoritism. Since she was so attached to this specific house, why didn't your parents sell it and split the money between you? That way, you have money to upgrade to a better house, and she doesn't get the double slap in the face of you alone being gifted the house of her dreams, while she gets nothing. Has she done something terrible to the family to lead your parents to completely cut her out like this? If not, then everyone sucks here, because you don't seem to care that your parents treat her so much worse than you. Not the a-hole. Your parents are playing favorites, which sort of sucks. But a house costs a lot more beyond the initial monthly payment, and I suspect they know she won't be able to maintain or afford it if she's waiting for them to die before she gets it. I would ask your parents to handle it, as it's their call ultimately. Not the a-hole. So your parents give her $500 a month, $6,000 a year, have bought her numerous cars, and all the furniture that she has. I'm gonna assume each car was at least $10K, times 4 is $40K, another $10K in furnishings, and the $6K each year for what, 3 to 5 years? $40K plus $10K plus $18K equals $68K, which is way over half of the value of the house you were getting. So she has and still is getting a portion of her inheritance every single month. As you said in one of your posts, you plan on giving $16K to your parents, and that they can do anything they want with that money, including give it to your sister. My parents are both living, healthy, and relatively young, both in their 40s. But they recently redrafted their will due to everything going on. My sister is 25 living at home, and I'm 20 living in an apartment. So honestly, I feel this point is moot. However, my sister is extremely upset with me. Since my parents redrafted their wills, my mother decided to sit down with my sister and me separately to discuss things. My sister wanted everything to be split down the middle, but did not want to liquidate the property. She was wanting my mother to allow us to buy each other out, so whoever had the funds would be able to have our family farm. My mother did not agree with this prospect due to the inability for us to have the assets to purchase such a property, especially at this age. She sat down with me separately, and I told her I'd rather have my sister be given all the liquid assets if I was able to keep the farm. My mother agreed with this since it was fair, and allowed for the land to stay in the family. When talking to both of my parents, they wanted to give me most of the sentimental items, while my sister got first pick of particular family heirlooms. While we both are getting items and they are relatively similar value-wise, financially split down the middle more or less. Most of mine have family ties to them as well. My parents know my sister is less responsible with money, has difficulty keeping a job, and does not treat her or others' property well due to some of her medical history. This belief supported their reasoning. Well, my parents told my sister the new arrangement so it will not come as a surprise, and she is utterly furious that I coerced my parents into giving me the land and more family heirlooms. When she read the will, the anger doubled. Because it was listed in the event they passed, she would have 6 months to move out of the family home. Now she's claiming I not only stole her inheritance, but am rendering her essentially homeless in the instance our parents die. My sister and I have always been civil, but she's been coming after me, calling me all sorts of names and telling people that I have stolen her rightful inheritance. Am I the a-hole for negotiating inheritance with my parents? I honestly feel somewhat guilty for pushing her to this point, especially during Christmas time when we're supposed to spend time together. Edit. Some people have been asking if the assets are similar in value, which financially they are. I have lots of sentimental value for the farm, hence why I'd rather have the property than money. Edit 2. Someone asked about the disabilities, so I'll copy that response here. My sister has bipolar depression and memory loss due to adolescent epilepsy. I also have PTSD, ADHD, cerebral palsy, and other neurological conditions that are progressing. Therefore, I do not take the difficulties we have into high account in this particular situation, since our disabilities do not directly correlate with the situation. My parents have already set up a system for their passing that would provide her long-term insurance, and have a plan in place. The money she would be receiving would be approximately $5,000, in addition to her monthly SSI my mother has worked to get her. That would also be after the initial sum of money unbeknownst to me and life insurance. This money would be dispersed for more or less the rest of her life in the event they died. In addition, my sister has been able to live on her own but has since came back home due to being unable to manage money well and the inability to stay in a job. My disability makes me unable to live independently, but my boyfriend is able to assist me in that regard while I work towards raising money for a service dog. Curse insurance. I didn't really find this relevant, but I guess it's important. Not the a-hole. Your parents are the ones who drafted the will. This is what your parents wanted. I'd say not the a-hole even if they cut her out fully, but they didn't. It's still roughly equal. Sounds to me like she wants to split money down the middle without selling the house so that she can continue living there indefinitely until you buy her out, so that she can have her cake and eat it too. The way your mom decided to split things sounds fair, since what you and her would be receiving are of relatively equal financial value. Not the a-hole. And I feel bad for your parents that she's already engaging in this macabre fight over an inheritance before they're even dead. Not the a-hole. Your sister sounds entitled, and like she doesn't quite understand the responsibility of property ownership. She would also likely never agree to the appraisal pricing of the property in order to buy you out, which would then likely make her contest the will, and then let it bleed out in court for years. This was the right choice in the end, for all involved. 16 female. Parents are divorced. They got together in 2004, married in 2006, a couple months before I was born, and split up in late 2012. The divorce was finalized in early 2013. My parents' split really affected me. I got homesick, upset, and anxious when I was away from one parent, and it was the same when I was with the other. I cried all the time, was very withdrawn and sensitive, and thought I was the reason they split. It got tense for a while when my parents got new partners, but I eventually got used to it. If it's relevant, my dad married my stepmom in 2016 and has 2 kids with her. My mom has been dating my stepdad since 2016. I never knew why they divorced. I was around 6 when everything happened, and they could only explain it to me in a child-friendly way. Sometimes mommy and daddies grow apart. They still love each other. Everything happens for a reason. And I did question them as to why it was happening, but never got the truth until a week ago. It came out that my dad had been unfaithful to my mom. Him and this girl, who apparently was around 18-19, were together for 10 months before my mom found out via photos that the girl's mom posted on Facebook of them together. Expected drama ensued, and during the divorce process, my dad got engaged to the girl. He tried to introduce her to me. He told me that she was my new mommy, but I was cold towards her. I had to see her more after that and just never warmed up to her. They broke it off in 2014 for some reason, and that was that. I couldn't help but snap at him after finding out. I blew up at him. I yelled and told him that he had broken up our family for a girl he barely knew. He completely destroyed my mom and her trust, that he had the audacity to introduce us and tell me that she was my new mom, that he saw how much it affected me, that his 6-year-old wouldn't eat or talk because it had given me crippling anxiety, and I blamed myself, that he was too much of a coward to ever tell me about it. He argued back that it was none of my business, and my uncle, who let this whole thing slip, defended me and said he thought I knew, which is why he said it, and I had every right to be upset. I ended up storming out and stayed the night at a friend's. I gave him the story and he said that he understood I was upset, but it wasn't my place to yell at him. I'm confused with everything I feel too. I was young when they split. I wouldn't have expected them to tell me at that age. But when I was older, part of me doesn't feel like it's my place to be upset. Another part of me thinks I have every right to be upset at both him and my mom, since she never told me anything either. All in all, am I the a-hole for yelling at my dad after finding out why my parents divorced? Not the a-hole at all. Let me start by saying I hurt my own family by being unfaithful. Those choices I made may eventually come out later to my son, and if he's mad at me, I'll have to own my mistakes once again to a new person capable of understanding. It sounds to me like your dad feels crappy and doesn't want to relive the shame again. Still, you have a right to your feelings. Dad needs to own his crap, now and forevermore. We all need to. Not the a-hole. Of course it was your business and your place to yell at him. He betrayed you and your mother in a horrible, shameful way. Your friend is way clueless for what he said to you. Not the a-hole. His decision affected you all. You've been blaming yourself for the past 10 years, internalizing things, developing anxiety, along with a host of other things that come with divorced parents, bouncing between households. Holidays are stressful because the family is divided, so you have to spend it half with this one and half with that one. The new partners coming in and out of their life. The truth was bound to come out eventually, and I'm sure he imagined one day you might find out and how to address it with you. He just never prepared. Hopefully, you can both discuss this when things calm down and move forward when you're ready.